good afternoon, good morning, good whatever time zone you are in. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Olivia Stortz, and I am an analyst with the Performance Assessment Research and Evaluation Unit at the Office on Violence Against Women in the U.S. Department of Justice. Before I dive into my comments, I want to thank the Measuring Effectiveness Initiative, my colleagues at the Tribal Affairs Division at OVW, NCJ, and many others for creating this space for learning and collaboration today. And thank you all for taking time out of what I know is really busy and important work. Before my colleagues at MEI dive into the details of the adjusted performance reporting form that we're going to discuss today, I want to thank you for the time that you spend every 6 months on accurate and high quality performance reporting data. I understand that performance reporting often takes you away from important work. So please know that this data is valuable, it's used to inform decisions, and it's also available to you in our 2022 report to Congress, which I will share shortly. I wanted to lift up an example of how we use your data more recently. For example, a few weeks ago, our Principal Deputy Director shared grantee performance data at the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. So thank you for the time and thoughtfulness that goes into reporting. It is important and needed, and it is used to advance issues to prevent and address violence. As MEI will describe in greater details, the adjustments that we're going to discuss are focused on reducing the number of variables required in reporting and easing the amount of time performance reporting takes, because we know that you are doing incredibly important work and that performance reporting often takes you away from that work. The changes to the tribal government's form are responsive to a variety of things, including tribal consultation testimony over the years, direction from the Associate Attorney General to streamline grant processes, and a December 2023 executive order on reforming tribal funding, entitled Executive Order on Reforming Federal Funding and Support for Tribal Nations to better embrace our trust responsibilities and promote the next era of tribal self-determination. OVW is also working more broadly to make performance reporting easier, build data capacity, and ensure everyone has access to useful data. I'm going to turn it over to MEI, but feel free to reach out to OVW if you have any questions or concerns. We appreciate your time and look forward to reviewing your performance reports with this new form. So over to you, Hannah and Devin.
Thank you for setting that context for us today. Thank you again, Annette, for hosting us. And thank you all for being here. My name is Devin Grayson Wallace. I apologize for being a floating head at the moment. I'm having some technical issues with my video, but I might be able to be visible later on. And if not, I will be here over audio at least. So if anyone has any difficulties hearing me at any point, please don't hesitate to type into the chat and I'll try to adjust my microphone, the speed or pace. My name is Tim here with my colleague Hannah Unger from VAWA MEI. And okay. Sorry about that. Sticky fingers. Okay. Oh, my audio is breaking up. Breaking up in our test earlier. I will switch then.
I can hear you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for bearing with me and letting me know that you couldn't hear me before. What I was trying to say is my name is Devin, and that I've been having technical issues today. So please use the chat to let me know if at any point you have trouble hearing me or understanding what I am saying. So thank you all for understanding the assignment, even when I was already garbled. So I'm here with my colleague Hannah from the VAWA MEI, or the Violence Against Women Act Measuring Effectiveness Initiative. And we are the technical assistance provider for all things related to progress reporting. I'm going to ask anyone to please use the chat to say whether or not you have attended a training with us before, if you've participated in any kind of VAWA MEI webinar or a new grantee orientation, any kind of, or if you've reached out to us for one-on-one technical assistance, just trying to get a gauge for it. Has anyone here had contact with VAWA MEI before? Okay, I see a couple yeses, one no, someone saying it's their first training, a couple more no's. Okay, wonderful. So it seems like a big mix of some folks who we are reaching for the first time and some folks who have been with us for other trainings in the past. Thank you all for letting me know that. The team that Hannah and I are on is we are ourselves a grantee of OVW. So we are separate from the feds. We are not part of OVW. We have an agreement under a grant with OVW to do these two different things, this what we call a twofold mission for OVW. So the first is supporting OVW in measuring and highlighting the work of VAWA grantees around the country. And so the biggest way we do that is in that report to Congress that Olivia mentioned earlier today, where we summarize what was done with funding from this program and all the other programs, and then it gets turned into a report that is made public and sent to Capitol Hill and decision makers all up and down the federal government. The second half of our mission is supporting grantees such as yourselves with your semi-annual progress reporting. So we do that through things like these live trainings. We create resources that live on our website, and we also provide one-on-one technical assistance. You can call us or send us an email at any time, and we are more than happy to answer any questions you might have or walk you through anything on the progress reporting forums that might be confusing, or you just want to talk out your understanding with someone. We are always standing by and here to help interpret the progress reporting forms. So today we are going to very briefly touch upon the importance of progress reporting and how to download, fill out, and submit your progress report. But we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about the recently updated tribal government's progress reporting form. So for anyone who has submitted a tribal government's form previously, such as for the July to December 2023 period, which most organizations present likely would have done, the form is different for this current progress reporting period. The January to June 2024 reporting period form will look a little different. So we're going to talk about that. And then lastly, we're going to plug some other opportunities for more topic-specific trainings that will be coming up next month. All right, so why is it important to fill out your progress reporting form? As you likely all know, as soon as you or your organization becomes an OVW grantee, you are required to submit data on what was done with program funds every 6 months. But more than that requirement, your progress report is really your opportunity to communicate directly with OVW. Olivia is our program manager, and I know she reads our narratives very closely and looks at all the data that we are reporting. And I know that she does so for all the other grantees that she is the program manager for. The same goes for you and your progress report and your program manager. This is a really powerful way for your program manager to get a sense of how it's going, what types of barriers you're encountering in fulfilling the activities that you wanted to conduct with this funding. And it's also a way, these progress reports are a primary way that OVW and other decision makers can try to understand the scope of domestic and sexual violence. Looking at so many different progress reports closely helps them see trends across different communities across the country, helps them identify promising practices arising from the great work that grantees such as yourselves, are doing. And it also helps identify areas of need or where maybe additional funding might be really impactful going forward. So all of that is why you should fill out your progress reporting form. And this slide is about how you can fill out your progress reporting form. So the progress reports are PDF forms that are available on our website. So you will need to go to the VAWA MEI website, and this link right here will get you directly to the page where you can download your tribal government's progress reporting form. Once there, you will want to make sure that you download the form and save it to your computer. And we strongly recommend that you actually open the free version of Adobe called Adobe Acrobat Reader DC before you even open that form that you just saved to your computer, because that will just ensure that your form is open in Adobe, and it will make sure that all of the data you type into those fillable fields on the PDF get saved and that you're able to progress with your progress reporting. Once you've done that, you will want to save the form and submit it, upload it into your JustGrants account as a PDF attachment. You will need to log into JustGrants. And if you have any issues with that, unfortunately, we at MEI don't have any access to JustGrants. These numbers are really good ones to keep on hand just in case you ever get locked out of your account or are having difficulty navigating to where you need to upload that completed progress report. And one thing that we just like to note is that I've been calling this a progress report, but within JustGrants, it is called a performance report. And it's the same type of report. It's that PDF form that you want to fill out, and it will reflect all of your grant-funded activities. Some very broad tips for successful data reporting are to use the resources on our website. It's where you'll get the form, but there are also detailed instructions that accompany the form that you can download from our website. And that actually describes every single question on the form and sort of the definitions behind it, how to fill it out, and what the form is asked for. You can also register for the upcoming topical webinars next month in July, and those go over things like, how do I calculate my FTEs or my staff numbers for the staff question on the form? Or how do I report a victim as served versus when do I need to report the victim as partially served, not served? In general, throughout the progress reporting form, you want to make sure that you're only reporting on grant-funded activities and grant-funded staff. That is the intention behind this tribal government's program progress reporting. Is a VW, your program manager in particular, need to know what was able to be done with this, how were you able to use it. We always encourage you to use the narrative questions throughout the form, and as you'll hear today, there are some new ones and some additional narrative opportunities on this revised form. These optional information questions, in many cases, are the perfect place to discuss successes, provide more detail, or really tell the story behind the data, as well as explain any data issues. For example, if you're not able to report certain types of data, especially this round where some of the questions are brand new and you might not have been tracking and not able to report some of that information. At any time, please give us a call, send us an email. I hope if you take nothing else away from today, actually, I hope you take two things today. One, that there's a new form that must be used and is available on the MEI website. But two, that any questions you have related to progress reporting, even something simple like I'm having trouble typing into my form, that is something that we can help with. And we are always ready and eager to offer one-on-one technical assistance in whatever format works the best for you: Zoom, email, telephone call. This updated form I keep referring to, this slide summarizes what and why changes were made to the tribal government's program form. So as you all are likely very well aware, there were changes under the reauthorization of VAWA in 2013 and 2022 that revised everything from the types of crimes that tribal government grantees were able to use funding to address, as well as the age of victims that tribal government grantees are able to use victim services funding to help. There's many more changes than those, and we will walk through the ways that they are reflected on the revised progress reporting form. But the intention behind these updates were to give all tribal government grantees the opportunity to thoroughly and accurately document what was done with tribal government's funding, and including all of the additional types of activities and focus areas included in the 2013 and 2022 reauthorization. Some of the changes were also intended to bring as much ease and enhance the quality and utility of the data collected from grantees. Hopefully, some of the changes will seem very helpful. And finally, it is okay if you cannot fully answer all of the new questions for the January to June 2024 reporting period. Your program specialists and OVW know that this is the first time that this data is being collected from tribal government grantees in these instances of the new questions. And the ask is that you do the best you can, simply report to the best of your ability, report what information you have, and then note any barriers to answering those questions in the narrative box at the very end of the form. It's important, please don't make guesses. If you think you have a rough idea of a number for a new question, but you don't have the supporting documentation or you're not positive, please, we encourage you to leave the question, the numeric question blank, but then describe what you do know or what was done with the funding related to that question in the narrative. One of the major updates is the addition of sex trafficking. So in the 2013 reauthorization of VAWA, sex trafficking was added to the crimes that tribal government grantees are allowed to use OVW funding to address. So for the purposes of this form, the definition of sex trafficking is a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age, and or the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. You probably all have your own working definitions of this, but in case at any point you need to reference the official definition for the purposes of VAWA, this is the way it is defined, and this is the way that tribal government grantees are able to use grant funds now. Sex trafficking, the ability to report on activities related to sex trafficking, was added in a variety of places to this new form. The first place is in the General Grant Information section in question 8, which asks about the percentage of funds used. So previously, you needed to break down the percentage of funds used into the other crime categories, such as domestic violence, sexual violence. And so now in question 8, sex trafficking is also a choice that you can allocate some percentage of funds used for. Sex trafficking was also added to a number of victim services questions as a new victimization that tribal government grantees can serve victims of, including question 36, total number of victims served, question 40, the number of secondary victims, and question 44, victim relationships to offenders. And I see that we have a question in the chat. Kathleen is asking, will funds be able to be used for human trafficking? And since this gets back to the statute, Olivia, I'm wondering if you have can speak to this before we move on.
Looks like my colleague Jennifer Marsh from the Tribal Affairs Division has popped on. Jen, would you mind answering this? If you can come off mute, you also answered it in the chat.
Yes, apologies, Jen. I saw your text, your chat response, just as I was trying to pass it over to Olivia. So I will read Jen's response. No, thank you for responding in the chat. Jen wrote, sex trafficking is one of the 5 crimes addressed by the tribal government's program. And Jen, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I do think that our host, Annette, could help you to unmute if that was something you wanted to do.
Yes,
You
can you
send
all
her
hear
a
me?
chat.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
now.
Yes. So sex trafficking specifically is one of the 5 crimes that's covered by the tribal government's program. So yes, you would report your grant funded activities related to sex trafficking in this portion of the form.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here. Be on hand for this. Sex trafficking can also be reported in these other sections, all criminal justice sections. So the first is case investigations, which is similar to the previously titled law enforcement section, which we'll discuss in greater detail. But within the case investigation section, question 55, case flow, and question 59, enforcement of protection orders, now have additional categories to represent work related to the crime of sex. Tribal prosecution also has question 63, number of cases received, accepted, transferred, or declined. And question 64, disposition of cases, have now been expanded to reflect the number of cases related to sex trafficking that were prosecuted with tribal government's grant funds and the disposition of those cases related to sex trafficking. I think we're getting a couple more questions about the different types of trafficking, and I'm going to make 2 requests. One is that I should have said this earlier, so my deep apologies. If you could please use the Q&A pod to launch your questions going forward, just so that we have a really clear record of what questions came up. And then second of all, I'll read Jen's response. So no, labor trafficking is not a crime covered by the tribal government. As you can probably, as I've been repeating this phrase of sex trafficking a bunch of times, that is the key to doing tribal government grant funded work related to trafficking, is that it's specifically sex trafficking that was expanded under VAWA 2013 that tribal government grantees can now work on. And so labor trafficking and human trafficking would not be included except in so far as they were related to trafficking or under the crime of sex trafficking as well.
I'll just pop in
So I
to
hope that
say,
helps. Yeah.
yeah, that was super helpful, Devin. I'll just pop in to say, if you have questions on how to spend your funds, that is probably a question for your program manager. If you have questions on how to report your activities, that's a question for MEI and for the research team. But any questions about how to spend your funds and what's an allowable cost, those are questions for your program manager. And we're lucky that a TAD program manager is here, but you can always email your program manager and ask these types of questions as well.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for that context and reminder. And thank you, Jen, for answering so many questions in the chat. So I'm going to keep going with the revisions to the forms. I already spoke to tribal prosecution, apologies. Within the tribal courts section, question 70, disposition of criminal cases, now also has additional fields for sex trafficking criminal cases. And within tribal probation and offender monitoring in question 77, you can now report the number of offenders under the crime of sex trafficking that are part of tribal government funded probation and offender monitoring. Okay, this is the last slide I'm going to speak to, and then I will kick it to my colleague Hannah to go into greater detail with the exact revision. Overall, the 2024 updates included some new questions. For example, section A1, general grant information, now it has question 7, which asks about the products and services in languages other than English. Any products and services that were offered using tribal government's grant funds can now be reported right there in question 7. In section D, question 10, statutory purpose areas, there are a revised list of purpose areas to choose from, which has been updated to reflect the purpose areas added in the 2013 and 2022 reauthorizations of VAWA. In section C1, training, and section C2, community education, were significantly revised, and we will go over those. And then there were minor updates made to other function area sections, such as data collection and system improvement. And we do have slides in this deck that speak to those updates, but I think we'll likely skip over them in the interest of time today because they are not as frequently reported. Section D, victim services, and section E, criminal justice system, were expanded, as I just went over, to include sex trafficking, but also with new questions added, which kind of we'll go over in detail. And some questions were removed or revised. In many cases, questions were revised to the narrative field. So hopefully they will offer more flexibility in filling out in demonstrating how tribal government's grant funds were used as thoroughly and accurately as. So with that, I'll pass it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Devin. What we have up now are the slides, and we do, continuing in the fashion that Devin has gone through, list out all of the questions and the changes that happened to them. And hopefully it'll be helpful. I'm going to start showing the form itself. And then you can see visually what the questions are. I'll still explain what the changes were, but like we said in the chat, we can send out these slides afterwards. So you'll have the very specific questions that were changed, and you can reference them to the form once you take a moment to sit down. So I'm going to go over the training section. I'm going to pop up the form and I'll zoom in a bit. Hopefully you're all seeing the form now. And it will look, if you are a seasoned grantee, if you filled out the progress reporting form for the last reporting period, it will appear very similar, but there will be some major differences. Just as before, it lists out all of the sections in the first section. The general information section is very similar to what it was before, with addition to those updates that Devin mentioned, question number 7, as well as question number 8, including sex trafficking. The staff section was actually a section that didn't really get any updates. So that should be quite familiar to you all if you're familiar with the forms. The purpose areas were updated. And then the training section. So this was the first section that really had some big updates to it. And hopefully it provides you all with some ease as well. And so you will still report if you use your tribal government funds to support training events. And so I'll remind you all, if you have reported here before, training for the purposes of these reporting forms means providing information on sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking and sex trafficking that provides professionals or volunteers acting in the role of professionals with a tool, a skill, a resource that better allows them to support victims and survivors. And so that's a little different from education. And we do have that separate education section after the training section, which we'll talk about in a moment. But just so you know, the education really for the form means providing some general information to increase public awareness. And so if you're using your tribal government funds to really provide a professional with a tool, a skill, a resource so they can better serve victims, you should be reporting in the training section. So you'll capture the total number of training events, so specifically your live training events, in that first question. And this question replaces what was previously in the training section, where if you're familiar with it, it asks you about very specific training events, if I'm remembering correctly. So you'll report on the live training events, and then you'll report the total number of people that were trained in those live training events. So you're just going to report a total number of people trained. Before, you used to have to list out the total for each professional category type. Now we just want a single total. And then in question number 13, you'll, if I click yes here and activate this section, the most frequently trained professionals will be indicated in this question by selecting them from this a drop down. So let's say you hosted or you trained attorneys and law students. That was the biggest group you trained. You would put that here. If then you also trained government agency staff, you could collect that there. And so we just are hoping to understand, or you would report the top 3 categories, even if you've trained many. Question 14 is a narrative question that replaced that long list of training content areas. So in question number 14, you will describe the topics that are discussed at your tribal government's program funded live training events. So you can use this space to talk about what it was that you trained on in those live events. We now have new questions in this section asking about, were tribal government funds used to develop, create, or launch pre-recorded trainings? So if you all are using funds to record a training, you post it on your website, or you have agency staff who's not grant funded review those trainings, you could click yes here and then report on the number of pre-recorded trainings that you use grant funds to support during the current reporting period. If you didn't use grant funds for pre-recorded trainings, you'd select no and move on to question number 18. But like I said, 16, you would report the total number of pre-recorded trainings that you put together in the current reporting period. And then question 17, which is also a new question, is where you would describe the target audience and the content of those pre-recorded trainings. Question 18 and question 19 are also new questions. So question 18 asks, did you collect any post-training feedback surveys or questionnaires for those tribal government program funded trainings that you put on during the current reporting period? If you did, you would select yes. And then in question 19, you would detail the responses or the findings that you got from those post-feedback surveys. If you did not collect that information, you click no and skip past question 19. Question 20 is the same optional additional information question that's always been in the training section. So community education, this is another section that had some significant revisions to it. I see that there was a question in the chat, bringing education and awareness is not considered training, correct? What if we do community awareness and there are professionals in attendance? And so Devin responded, correct. So education and awareness would be reported under the community education section, which is the one we're going to walk through now, which again, education is really providing general information that increases that public awareness. Training is providing a very specific tool or skill or resource so that they can better respond to victims in your communities. And so 21, you would report on the total number of live education events. So that's your exhibits, your tabling events, anything like that. You would count that here as long as it's supported by your grant funds. And then in question number 22, you would now just check all of the groups of people that were educated during those events. And so previously this question used to ask for the number of people who received those education activities. And now you just need to indicate which groups were in attendance. We have a couple new questions here asking, were tribal governments program funds used to develop and post or share public service announcements or social media content during the current reporting period? If you use your tribal government funds to support those activities, you would click yes, and then answer question 24. If you did not, you would click no and continue on. Question 24, you would check all that apply and indicate the target audiences of those public service announcements or that social media content that you put together. Oops. Question 25 is a narrative question where you can take the time to talk about the content of all of this education and public awareness activities that were supported with your tribal government funds during the current reporting period. It just dawned on me too, if you're somebody that's not familiar with these progress reports, I wanted to call out that there are two different types of sections on these forms, ones that are mandatory and ones that are optional. So you will need to fill out all the sections that are mandatory, and then for the sections that are optional, a question will be posed at the top of those sections. Were your tribal government funds used for that activity during the current reporting period? And if you did not use your tribal government funds for education events or training events, you would select no, and that would skip you ahead to the next section, and you don't have to worry about any of these questions in the section itself. Only if you use funds for these activities do you need to report in the questions in that section. So for example, I did not use tribal government funds to support community education. I would click no, and it jumps me right ahead to the next section. So then, like Devin noted a little bit ago, there's some questions or sections in the middle of the form that I'm going to really breeze through just because they're not reported as frequently. The coordinated community response section was simplified. If you were familiar with it before, there were a lot more columns here where you would report the frequency of the activities that you were doing with other agencies in your community. Now you just need to select if you provided referrals to, received referrals from, met with, engaged in consultation with any of the listed agencies during the current reporting period. So you just check all that apply, as well as check off any of your collaborative partners. I'm going to zoom past these sections and bring us to the victim services section. If you have any questions about any of the sections that I'm zooming past, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Devin said, this is what we're here for. We're happy and eager to answer questions that you have. Okay. Before I get into the victim services section, I see there was a question in the Q&A pod. If you do presentation at a school, does the cost of swag considered here, being DV bracelets, SA stickers, etc.? When I see Devin is typing an answer,
Sorry, Hannah, I shouldn't have done that. I was going to just type whatever you wrote in case the person wanted to read it along. Do you have a ready answer, Hannah? But yeah.
I think the cost of preparing for the presentations does go into the consideration of whether or not tribal government funds were used to host the activity or support the activity. I actually think I feel a little unclear about how like swag would come into play here. I would default back to, okay, were the funds used for supporting the staff time to coordinate the event? And if so, then you would go ahead and report on those activities in those sections. If you use tribal government funds only for the stickers and bracelets and things, I would pause and want to connect with the program specialist or have them connect with the program specialist if that's where they would want those activities reported on the reporting form.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And I would go maybe potentially one step further too, because I believe that I've never seen this question asked under the context of tribal governments before, but I believe I've seen in the context of another program that swag is actually not an allowable use of funds. I'm thinking of one program in particular that I have, the campus program. where it has come up as a question many times. So I would actually refer you to either your program specialist or the program specialist in the room today as to, I would start by confirming the use of funds towards SWAG, and then, as Hannah said, go from there, asking them about how they would like to see that use of funds reflected. And certainly, if in addition to whatever SWAG you have approved, you are coordinating the event and putting it on, you'll certainly be reporting that event in the section.
Great. Thank you, Devin. I see a couple notes in the chat pod. Rebecca reached out and said, outreach and awareness items are allowable use of grant funds with prior approval. I see someone else wrote to just the hosts and panelists saying SWAG is not an allowable cost. So yeah, it makes sense to definitely get in touch with your program specialist at OVW to make sure what is allowable and no allowable use of funds. And then Rebecca wrote, SWAG is not allowable. Thank you so much. Okay, keep the questions coming. I'm going to dive into the victim services section. I know we're quickly running out of time. So this section, the whole services to victim survivors and family section was altered a fair bit. Like Devin mentioned before, sex trafficking was added to the applicable questions in this section. So you'll see that in the question where you report on the number of victim survivors who were fully served, partially served, or not served. Question 37 is a new question where you report the number of victim survivors who received tribal government's program funded services for multiple types of victimizations. And so what we mean by that is if you had 5 survivors that you reported as receiving support with domestic violence in question number 36, and you also supported them with a sexual assault with your tribal government funds, you would report those 5 victims here. So then OVW knows, okay, maybe you reported 5 victims, domestic violence victims in the first question, but actually those 5 victims you reported received support for other victimizations. And then in question 38, you would select all of the additional victimizations types or the specific forms of abuse for which they received tribal government program funded services. So if, like in my example, if those 5 domestic violence victims received assistance for sexual assault, you would click off sexual assault here. 39 is a new question where you describe how tribal government program funds were used to serve victims who received services for more than one victimization, taking a moment to talk about how the funds were able to support the victims with both the domestic violence and the sexual assault in my example. Question 40, the number of secondary victims who received tribal government program funded services. This question replaced the question that was previously in this section related to providing services to children. And secondary victims may be children, siblings, spouses, parents, grandparents, etc. So this kind of expands a little bit more where you can report the secondary victims, all victims who receive tribal government program funded services, and you would indicate under which victimization they receive services for. Question 41 is pretty much the same question where you report on all of the reasons that victims that were reported as partially served and not served, why they were reported that way. There was the addition of one category, which is the insufficient or lack of services for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. There was an addition of a narrative question here where you're asked to describe why grant funded services were not why they were not able to be provided. So really giving you an opportunity to talk in more detail about those reasons and the challenges and barriers that you faced when trying to support the victim and how that impacted the victims. So this is an optional question and that we do hope you fill out. See some questions popping up for time. I'm going to keep going as long as you're good with answering them, Devin, and we can you can circle back and say them out loud once we get through victim services. Question 43, demographics. We had some addition in all of these sections, these subsections. So in the race ethnicity category, the addition of Middle Eastern or North African was added. We also added in people of a race, ethnicity, or origin not listed, where you can then specify how they identify in that space provided. For this, it's set up the same way that it was before, where you can report a victim in each category that they identify as. So if somebody both identifies as white and African-American, you can report that victim in both the white category and in the Black or African-American category. As long as this total here at least equals the total number of victims you reported as served and partially served, you should be good to go. Under the gender category, we had some additions. We now have, in addition to women or girls or boys or men or boys, we have transgender, non-binary or non-conforming, two-spirit, and then a gender not listed. So an option to then specify how they identify. And so similar to the race ethnicity subsection, this total can just, it needs to be at least equal to the total number of victims served and partially served, but you can report a victim if they identify in more than one of these categories. The age category was updated. Previously, this said 13 and now says 11, since you're able to serve victims age 11 and up. So the form was updated to reflect that. Additional demographics, we added in a few more categories here. We added in people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and people who are immigrants, refugees, or asylum seekers. This other demographics or additional demographics subsection is 100% optional. You do not have to report in this. Any of this information should not be required to provide grant-funded services to victim survivors. Getting this information should not pose a barrier to you providing the services that you need to provide. This is only as you learn it or have it. It's optional information. Victim survivors' relationship to offender was updated again to include sex trafficking, and we now include it in other categories, so you can specify if that relationship doesn't fit in the existing categories. Question number 45B, shelter services. I want to call this out because this question actually replaces the entire shelter/transitional housing assistance subsection that used to exist in the tribal government's form. And if you use your tribal government's funds to support emergency shelter or transitional housing during the current reporting period, you would now capture those activities in this one little question here. You report the number of victim survivors, the number of family members, and then the number of bed nights that your grant funds supported. I think there was a couple other minor updates to the victim services section here. I believe we added in the total number of calls to hotline. We removed in the protection orders category, there used to be a line here for the number of protection orders that was granted. It is now only asking for the number of protection orders, or excuse me, I said granted. I meant to say we removed the requested line. It is only asking for the protection orders that were granted, that tribal government's funds supported. The legal services section was updated some. Hopefully it was, it'll be a little bit more streamlined for you. Previously, there used to be, under the legal issues question, 2 categories where you would report the pending matters and the new, or excuse me, pending legal issues and the new legal issues during the current reporting period. Now you will only report one number. You simply report the number of victims that received legal assistance during the current reporting period. And then instead of reporting all of the different legal matter outcomes that happened during the current reporting period. You can now just report on the total number of cases that were closed or issues that were resolved during the current reporting period. And as I said, we removed or replaced the transitional housing assistance section with that one question. So it goes right to supervised visitation as the last section or subsection in the victim services section. And this was also drastically reduced. And if you use your tribal government funds for supervised visitation activities, you will now report on the number of families that were served, partially served or not served with your grant funds. You will report on the number of custodial parents, non-custodial parents, and the children. You will report on the reasons why those families that were reported as partially served or not served were not able to receive full services by now only selecting all that apply. So similar to the victim services section, you'll just click off the ones. And then you will report on the services that tribal government program funds provided to those families. And that's it. So you no longer will report demographic information or any of the other questions, the referral information, the family issues. You will now just be reporting the number of families served, the reasons for those that were partially served or not served, and then the services that you provided to them with your grant funds. There is a narrative question at the end of all of these victim service subsections where you can take a moment to describe the successes and challenges your agency experienced with providing tribal government funded victim services, legal services, supervised visitation, etc. So really, we encourage you to use this space to talk in detail about how things are going for you in providing services and how it impacts the families, victims in your communities. Okay, I'm gonna pause before handing it back over to Devin to take us through the criminal justice section. Are there any questions that we should call out loud that came up while I was talking?
Yeah, I'm going to try this, but again, if it starts breaking up, let me know and I'll switch back to audio only. One person asked about secondary victims and whether children staying in transitional housing with mom should be counted under the secondary victim category. And for anyone listening but not reading along, secondary victims are all people who are indirectly affected by the domestic/sexual violence of a primary victim who is being served. So in this case, yes, if you are providing housing that a child of a primary victim is receiving as well, you would be able to count that child as a secondary victim served. And then someone else asked if today's webinar will be available to access later. And so I apologize. I don't think I said that off the bat either, but we are recording today's webinar and that will be available on the MEI website probably sometime next week. And we can also send an email out letting participant registrants know when that recording is available. So thank you, Hannah. I will ask you, Hannah, if you can continue to steer along the page, because while it says I can control the slides, it doesn't say I can control the screen. So I don't know if I can or can't, but I'm just gonna assume I
Devin,
can't right now.
you broke up a little bit there.
Oh no. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. I'm gonna turn my video back off. Sorry, folks. I tried, but I don't wanna. I'll be right.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. In the criminal justice section, the first major change for anyone who is familiar with this form from the past is that the first section E1 in the criminal justice section has been retitled to the case investigation. This is fairly similar to it replaces the law enforcement section of the past, starting with this very first question 55, which asks about case flow. This question here replaces the former question that was labeled law enforcement activities. In this case flow question, you are going to report various different types of law enforcement activities by the primary victimization. You can see that includes calls for assistance, incidents reports, cases investigated, enforcement of warrants, fall arrests, dual arrests, and referrals of cases to prosecutor. And as you can see, there are the 3 original crimes of sexual assault, domestic violence / dating violence, and stalking. Sorry, that's 4 crimes I can't count. And an additional column now for sex trafficking. The next question 56 is a new question. It asks cases reviewed. In this question, please report the number of cases reviewed by supervisors for quality control and appropriate charges. This is something that I know happens in a variety of jurisdictions from speaking with grantees about how to capture this. And so hopefully for some folks out there, having a dedicated numeric question to case reviews will be helpful. Question 57, sexual assault kits, is also a new question. Here, please report the number of sexual assault kits that were transferred, submitted, and or processed by the crime lab during the current reporting period. Question 58, assistance with protection orders. This question has been restructured and it replaces the previous protection orders question. Here you will please report the number of temporary and final protection orders granted. It is no longer asking about the number requested, only the number granted, and for those to be broken out both by temporary and final. In question 59, enforcement of protection orders, this is another new question. Here, please report the number of protection orders served and the number of arrests for violations of protection orders that were conducted with tribal government's grant funds. This information was previously collected in the law enforcement activities question at the top of this, the old law enforcement section, and now it is a separate question all unto itself, asking about enforcement of POs. Question 60, information provided, is a new question replacing the previous referral to victim services. And here you will just report the types of information provided to victims with law enforcement program funds. Question 61, funds to support victims through criminal justice systems, is a new narrative question where we highly encourage you to describe how funds were used by law enforcement to support victims. You'll see there's that additional effectiveness narrative question, and I'll just briefly plug that it's always good to make good use of the narrative because it's a great opportunity to tell the story behind the numbers. In section E2, tribal prosecution, question 63, the very first question, number of cases received, accepted, transferred, or declined, has the new category of sex trafficking, but in addition, it has revised categories of transferred to higher or lower court outside the grant-funded jurisdiction and referred to federal prosecution. The next question, the old next question, reasons for declining cases, has been removed. You no longer need to be reporting the reasons for cases declined. Question 64, disposition of cases. The number convicted category has been condensed. So you will see there is one category now for the number of cases that were disposed of by way of a conviction. So it doesn't matter how the conviction was achieved, just report all convictions in that column. Violation of bail and violation of parole are now included in the category of violation of other court orders, so they don't have separate rows anymore in this question. Hopefully that brings some ease to users. Question 66, information provided, is a new question. This replaces the referrals to victim services question. Here you will report the types of information provided to victims with prosecution program funds. In question 67, prosecutor assistance with protection orders, the number of protection orders requested category has been removed, and you should here simply report the total number of temporary POs granted and final POs granted that prosecutors assisted victims with. In question 68, funds to support victims through criminal justice system is another new narrative question asking you to describe how funds were used by prosecutors to support victims. In section E3, the tribal court, the previous question titled criminal cases has been removed. Now the tribal court section begins with this question 70, disposition of criminal cases. Here, violation of bail and violation of probation categories are again now going to be considered under the violation of other court orders. So you don't need to separately track those bail and probation violations, put them all under violation of other court orders. There was a previous question asking about disposition of violations that has been removed. And the next, there's the judicial monitoring question, which is unchanged. But the next revised question is question 72, information provided. So this, again, similar to the other criminal justice sections we've gone over, replaces the referrals to victim services question. So here, please report the types of information provided to victims with court program funds. You can just check all that apply, same as you will be doing in the other section if you're using funds that way. Question 73, civil protection orders. Again, the number of protection orders requested category has been removed, and so you will simply be reporting on the number of civil protection orders granted, both temporary and final. In question 70, nope, I'm skipping, sorry folks. Same thing goes for question 74, criminal protection orders. So again, the number of criminal POs requested category has been removed, and the form is now only collecting the criminal protection orders granted. In question 75, funds to support victims through criminal justice system is another new narrative question. This question asking how funds were used by the courts to support victims. It's a great place to talk about the strength of your program. And it is followed by that additional information question asking about effectiveness of courts activities, which again, we encourage you to use because it's a great opportunity to speak directly to your program specialist about what you're doing with funds. In section E4, tribal probation / offender monitoring, question 77, number of offenders has been slimmed down. So previously, there was one column for the number of continuing offenders and a separate column for the number of new offenders. And now that has been combined into the number of offenders monitored category. Similarly, the number of offenders being reported as completing without violations and with violations has been combined. So you will simply be reporting the number who completed probation now. In question 78, monitoring activities, there is a new category of electronic monitoring. As you can see, you will only be reporting the number of offenders who are monitored by way of electronic monitoring, not total contacts, because that's not how electronic monitoring works. And outreach to victims was removed from question 78. In question 79, disposition of probation violations, all violation categories have been combined into the number of dispositions category. For all of the violations disposed of during the current reporting period, please report according to the particular disposition, no action, fine, revocation of probation, etc. That brings me to partial revocation and probation revoked / incarcerated used to be two separate categories. And now both of those fit in their one category of revocation of probation. So even if it's only a partial revocation, that was the outcome of that disposition of the probation violation, please report it under this last column Hannah just highlighted of revocation of probation. Question 80, information provided, replaces the old referrals to victim services question. Here, report types of information provided to victims with probation and parole program funds. In question 81, funds to support victims through criminal justice system is one of those new narrative questions. We ask you to please describe how funds were used by probation and parole to support victims. And there is that additional narrative opportunity. Section E5, abuser intervention program. This last criminal justice section, was previously titled Batterer Intervention Program. If you are looking for the BIP program, it is now called the BIP section. It is now called Abuser Intervention Program. Question 83, offenders in program. The number of continuing offenders and the number of new offenders have been combined from those two separate categories into one category titled number of offenders. The old question of length of intervention program in weeks has been removed. You no longer need to report the length of your program. And question 85, program model, replaces the old optional additional information generic question and instead specifically asks you to describe the model of the funded intervention program. I'm going to see if there are any new questions in the Q&A pod. There are not. If anyone has a question on any of these criminal justice sections that I just breezed through, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A pod to ask them, or feel free to follow up with us following today's presentation. We can talk through them in greater length. And with that, I will pass it back to Hannah to talk about some additional upcoming training opportunities beyond today.
Thank you, Devin. I want to acknowledge that both Devin and I have just shared a lot of information. A lot of the information we shared probably doesn't apply to your specific situation, and maybe only 10% of what we shared does. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions that you have, or even just to sit one-on-one and be like, this is my grant, this is what we do, where do I put those activities? We're happy to do that. And if that's not your preference or your learning style, we do, like Devin said, have these topic specific webinars that you all are encouraged to and welcome to attend. So the first one we have is Introduction to Semi-Annual Progress Reporting, which is on July 8th. And so in this webinar, we'll cover kind of a lot of what Devin and I have covered at the beginning of here, of you're expected to report every 6 months. This is what happens to your data. Here's where you report it. Here's how you download the PDF form from the MEI website so that you can successfully fill it out and submit it, things like that. So if you're a new person to progress reporting, definitely encourage you to attend that one. The victim services one on July 9th, we go in depth into how to report in all of those questions in the victim services section. So what does it mean when you have a victim who receives multiple grant funded services, but actually they actually requested more and you couldn't give it to them or provide them to them? How do you capture them? We'll get into the nitty gritty about the victim service section in that one. Calculating FTEs is all about that staff section. There are a lot of different ways to go about capturing your grant funded staff time, and it probably differs for each and every one of you how it's tracked. Maybe it's by the hour, maybe you know that somebody's full-time, they're working 40 hours a week, but they only work under the grant for the last 3 months. How do you report that? Those are the type of questions we'll dive into there. Crafting narratives, telling the stories behind your data. On July 17th, that's where my staff will get into how to go about answering all of those narrative questions and what does it mean to tell the story behind your data. The numeric boxes on the reporting forms only tell a portion of what you're doing with your grant funds, and really the narrative questions are where you can get the full, where OVW and MEI can get the full picture of what's happening in your communities. Devin posted we have recordings of our previous versions of these webinars. So if you can't attend these live webinars, we do have recordings of them available that cover the same content. Looks like Devin will share the links to those recordings on our website. Do you have any questions about progress reporting that we did not cover? You can type them in the chat, use the Q&A pod. Just want to provide a few minutes to answer Q&As about anything and everything. We're happy to do that. I'll go ahead and put up the thank you. We have our phone number and then our email address up there. I know Devin put her email address in the chat. I'll go ahead and do the same for me. Don't hesitate to us. This is what we're here for. We're here to answer the questions you have. Okay, good. It looks like the links are coming through in the chat. I'm glad to hear that. Internet is your best friend until it's your worst enemy. That's how I feel. Okay. Not seeing a lot of activity, but Devin and I will definitely stay on for the next 5-10 minutes, depending on how things go, to answer any questions. We dedicated this time to y'all about the reporting form, so we're happy to be here.
Yes, thank you all so much for being here and for all the grace with my technical issues. Really appreciate everyone taking the time, and particularly, again, thank you, Annette from NCJ SCJ, for hosting us. And thank you to VITEC, our closed captioning group. Really couldn't reach grantees without you all. We really appreciate the help. Thank you to Olivia from OVW, as well as the multiple other program specialists I saw who were here today, for being on hand to answer various statutory questions. This is really helpful. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who asked a question too. It's always great. At least we know that people are thinking and going to be able to use some of this information when we get questions during these presentations. So really appreciate that participation. Thank you all for your time.
Nobody asked for it. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. I'm going to just pull up our website. If you haven't been to our website, it's vawamei.org, and you'll land on this homepage. If you scroll down, I know Olivia shared the 2022 report to Congress, but you can also access it on our page. If you've never been to our page, it can be a little overwhelming. I recommend that you go to grant programs, and here all of the grant programs that are funded under VAWA will appear, but you will scroll down, find tribal governments, and then that will open up your program specific page where you can access the reporting form. Again, make sure you download that onto your computer and open it in Adobe. Web browsers like to play tricks on you sometimes and open it in a web browser. And if you do that, it won't retain the information you're entering. You likely can't enter information into all of the fields. If you're running into those issues, don't hesitate to reach out. We do also have a separate, the separate reporting form instructions. So this document goes into detail into all of the questions on the reporting form, lists them out by question, so you can access them, more details and examples there. The trainings that Devin linked to are available. You can register for those, as well as then the training videos. You can access those from your reporting page as well. Yeah, a lot of information available here. We've got some FAQs. So I'll pause and I'll stop screen sharing. Hopefully that was a helpful little quick tutorial. And again, I echo all of the thank yous that Devin said, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.